July 13th, 2024. The world watched in shock as former President Trump fell to the ground at his Pennsylvania rally. The crowd's cheers turned to gasps as Secret Service agents rushed the stage. But what if the shooter's aim had been different? In this video, we're mapping out exactly what would have happened next, from the immediate Secret Service protocols to the constitutional procedures triggered at such a critical moment just days before the Republican convention. We'll explore how American democracy operates during moments of crisis, examining the legal frameworks and emergency measures designed to maintain stability when history takes an unexpected turn. The first 60 minutes, constitutional crisis activated. What happens in those critical first 60 minutes after an assassination attempt becomes successful? The machinery of government snaps into action with remarkable precision, at least when it involves a sitting president. But when it's a former president, who's also the presumptive nominee of a major political party, that's where things get complicated. In the immediate aftermath of what could have been a successful assassination, the Secret Service's counter-sniper team would have already neutralized the threat, but their work would continue. Their primary mission, protecting the former president, would transition into a broader operation. While we witnessed their rapid response in the actual attempt, in our hypothetical scenario, those same agents would implement protective evacuation protocols. The Secret Service operates with detailed contingency plans that activate simultaneously across multiple branches of government, like an emergency drill that everyone has practiced separately but never performed together. Each agency moves with precision, though this particular crisis lacks a well-rehearsed playbook. The FBI would immediately assume control of the crime scene, transforming a political rally into the center of the largest criminal investigation in recent American history. Every bullet casing, witness statement, and electronic device would be catalogued with meticulous care. Evidence response teams would establish concentric perimeters, preserving physical evidence while establishing a timeline crucial for prosecution. Intelligence agencies rapidly shift communication protocols during such crises. Within minutes of confirmation, they implement a controlled communication blackout, a strategic pause to assess whether the event was isolated or part of a coordinated attack. CIA and NSA analytical teams activate, scanning global communications for any indication of additional threats. This immediate response highlights the constitutional ambiguity surrounding such events. If this were a sitting president, the 25th Amendment provides clear guidance on succession. The vice president would assume presidential powers, the cabinet would be notified, and the nuclear football would change hands. For a presidential candidate, however, the Constitution offers virtually nothing. The Speaker of the House would still move to a secure location, standard procedure as third in presidential succession, even though this protocol has no direct relevance to a candidate's assassination. This reflects how government emergency procedures focus primarily on protecting continuity of government, not political parties or campaigns. Meanwhile, the Attorney General's determination would shape everything that followed. Designating the assassination as domestic terrorism gives federal law enforcement expanded investigative powers. Warrants that normally take days could be expedited. America's counterterrorism apparatus would fully engage within that first critical hour. Every decision made in these first 60 minutes creates the template for everything that follows. Communication strategies developed quickly become the foundation for public addresses. Initial security assessments determine protection levels for other political figures. Preliminary intelligence judgments shape investigative priorities that determine whether accomplices or broader conspiracies are identified. All this happens against a backdrop of constitutional silence. While procedures exist for a sitting president's death, a party's presumptive nominee falls into a gray area where formal constitutional processes end and party rules begin. The Republican National Committee would navigate uncharted waters, with procedures for selecting a replacement nominee, but without historical precedent after an assassination. This constitutional gap creates ripple effects beyond succession. Federal agencies operate without clear directives about jurisdiction and authority. State election officials face uncertainty about ballot access requirements. The mechanics of democracy suddenly seem fragile and impoverished. The timing makes this scenario particularly challenging. Days before a national convention where 2,429 delegates were prepared to formally nominate the now deceased candidate. Unlike the orderly transfer of power outlined for sitting presidents, a candidate's death creates an instant power vacuum within the party, triggering internal succession battles when unity would be most needed. Convention chaos, the 48-hour nomination scramble. The assassination would transform what was planned as a ceremonial coronation into something America hasn't witnessed since 1976. a truly contested convention where no one knows the outcome. What makes this situation particularly unprecedented is that political parties operate as private organizations largely outside constitutional oversight. The entire process to replace a deceased nominee exists in a bizarre legal grey zone where party officials would essentially be forced to create new procedures in real time while managing a national crisis. Consider the extraordinary timing. The Republican National Convention in Milwaukee was just 48 hours away when disaster struck. Thousands of delegates, alternates, media personnel, and party officials were already arriving in Wisconsin, many having boarded planes before news of the assassination broke. The convention's elaborate security perimeter, stage production, and week-long schedule presented years of planning and millions in commitments. The RNC would face an immediate decision: proceed with a modified convention or postpone the entire event. This represents both a logistical and deeply symbolic choice. Proceeding projects strength during crisis, demonstrating the democratic processes continue despite violence. Postponement shows respect whilst providing breathing room to establish proper nomination procedures. Throughout American history, even contentious conventions like the 1924 Democratic Gathering that required 103 ballots had clear rules. This situation would have none. Presidential nominations exist entirely outside America's constitutional system. While the Constitution details presidential succession, it remains silent on how parties select nominees. The RNC's Rules Committee would transform overnight into perhaps the most powerful body in America, convening emergency meetings to establish entirely new nomination procedures under extraordinary pressure with the world watching. The 2,429 delegates arriving in Milwaukee would find themselves in an unprecedented position. Though they arrived pledged to Trump based on primary results, these pledges function as party rules that can be modified. In tragedy's aftermath, every delegate becomes a free agent in what political scientists call a brokered convention, a rarity in modern politics with echoes of the Ford-Reagan battle of 1976, though far more chaotic. Meanwhile, these delegates, local party officials, small business owners, and community leaders would transition from ceremonial voters to kingmakers. Like musicians in a suddenly thrown together orchestra, they'd need to create harmony while processing their own shock about the assassination. Ambitious politicians, originally positioning themselves for 2028, would face difficult choices about pursuing the nomination so soon after a tragedy. Behind the scenes, negotiations would unfold across Milwaukee hotels as potential nominees build delegate coalitions. The vice presidential selection process would collapse into hasty backroom deals designed to secure crucial support, with careful vetting replaced by political necessity. Party unity would strain precisely when most needed. Different Republican factions, traditionalists, populists, moderates, might champion different candidates, each believing their standard-bearer represents the best path forward. The pressure to project unity during national trauma would clash with intense internal disagreements. This political drama would unfold on live television, transforming from a choreographed rally into genuine uncertainty until the final ballot. News networks would explain arcane party rules as delegate counts shifted hourly, creating a spectacle unlike anything seen in generations. The assassination's trauma would shadow everything. Each potential candidate would balance mourning with ambition. Speeches would be rewritten, convention imagery redesigned, and campaign strategies completely rethought within days. The psychological impact on delegates voting under these circumstances would remain profound and unpredictable, creating a political moment without precedent in modern American history. The ballot access nightmare. While party officials grapple with selecting a replacement nominee, an even darker storm brews on the horizon, one that threatens the very foundation of America's electoral system. The hastily selected nominee would emerge from Milwaukee's chaos only to face a truly daunting challenge: actually getting their name on the ballot in November. America's decentralized election system wasn't built to handle mid-campaign assassination, and in some crucial battleground states, the legal window to add a new candidate would have already slammed shut. Most Americans don't realize that presidential elections operate through 50 separate state systems, each with unique laws and deadlines. By late July, several swing states, including Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, Georgia, and Arizona, would have filing deadlines already passed. The new Republican nominee would face an immediate legal crisis, their name absent from ballots in states that could determine the entire election. The situation resembles trying to patch a leaky boat with mismatched materials during a storm, each state applying different solutions to the same critical problem. Some secretaries of state might grant emergency exceptions for the replacement nominee, while others might interpret their laws strictly, creating a concerning possibility. Voters in Florida might see one Republican nominee, while Michigan voters see either the deceased candidate's name or no Republican option. Legal battles would cascade like dominoes across the electoral landscape. Republicans would file emergency petitions in every problematic state, while Democrats would face their own difficult choice between challenging these exceptions or appearing opportunistic during national tragedy. State courts would produce potentially contradictory rulings across jurisdictions. Consider Maria, a Michigan voter who opens her mail in October to find a ballot listing a deceased presidential candidate. Confused and disturbed, she calls her county clerk, who explains that ongoing legal battles prevented updating the ballots before printing deadlines. Maria wonders if her vote will even count, a concern shared by millions of Americans caught in this constitutional crisis. Mail-in ballots present particular challenges since many states begin printing these 45 to 60 days before Election Day. If legal challenges remain unresolved by printing deadlines, some states might proceed with incorrect ballots, creating unprecedented voter confusion. Some states would require special legislative sessions to modify election laws, introducing raw partisan politics into administrative procedures. In states with divided government, these sessions could become bitter standoffs, raising the political temperature when it's already dangerously high after an assassination. The Electoral Court Act provides little guidance for this scenario. With different states handling the crisis differently, we could face competing slates of electors from the same state, constitutional chaos not seen since the disputed election of 1876. The Supreme Court would inevitably intervene to establish nationwide standards for ballot access, but any decision would be viewed through a partisan lens, further straining the court's legitimacy. This ballot access crisis reveals a profound vulnerability in America's constitutional system. Their framers never envisioned their current nomination process, nor how state-level election administration might collapse under such pressure. Even if these legal hurdles were cleared through court rulings, emergency legislation, and administrative accommodations, the replacement nominee would enter the general election severely disadvantaged, constructing an entire presidential campaign in weeks while their opponent had been preparing for months. The psychological impact on voters would be impossible to predict. Conclusion. When democracy faces its darkest moments, we discover where the constitutional framework ends and unwritten norms begin. The assassination of a presidential candidate would expose this fragile boundary, potentially triggering a crisis of confidence in the electoral process itself. America's democratic resilience depends on more than constitutional design. It rests on the commitment of citizens and leaders to navigate unprecedented waters with restraint and wisdom. Like the uncertain days following Lincoln's assassination, our ability to overcome political polarization and maintain steadfast adherence to the rule of law would determine whether our democratic experiment endures in moments of national trauma. Stay tuned.